you lovely kings, queens, and in-betweens, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Elaine, and today I'm going to be continuing my summary and review of Brandon Sanderson's Rhythm of War, the fourth novel in the Stormlight Archives. Today is going to be focusing on Part 2, Our Calling, and I'm going to just jump right back into things with the summary. Chapter 20, The Unseen Court. Shallan oversees the training of her Lightweavers, the Unseen Court. She realizes that Mraize wants something out of Restares, a secret she wants to both discover and use to her advantage. In preparation of her upcoming mission, Shallan tries to figure out whom the spy amongst them is, Veil arguing that the most suspicious should be brought along on the mission so that they can be watched, Radiant arguing against it. Eventually, Shallan decides to bring Ishna, Vatha, and Stargyle, one of the newest recruits, to Shadesmar with her. That puts Red in charge while they're away. Shallan had chosen 3 out of the 4 most suspicious recruits she had to bring along, breaking the compact. Radiant suddenly changes her stance, it's settled, and Veil is determined to discover the spy's identity and use the information against Mraize. They need to finish preparing. Upon returning to her room, Veil discovers a gift from Mraize, a metal cube and a note. It reads, "Span reeds do not work between realms, but this will. Be very careful with it. It has a value beyond that of some kingdoms. Do not open it, or you risk destroying it. Once on your mission, and in a secluded place, hold the cube and call my name. I will speak to you through it. Good hunting, little knife," on 304. Veil wonders how she is going to hide it from Adolin. Chapter 21, The Seething Knot. Adolin begins preparing for his mission. He discovers that Beryl will be replacing Stargyle on the trip because his wife is ill and he wants to remain with her. Adolin thinks about how Shallan was released from Yasna's wardship and isn't the best at soulcasting, how he had never murdered anyone innocent, like his father had burned his mother to death, creating a seething knot inside him. Adolin realizes his father wants him to become a Radiant. It's part of the reason why he's going on the trip. Adolin and the rest of the travelers head into Shadesmar. He feels like a little boy after speaking to his father about his beliefs and what Dalinar thinks of him. Chapter 22, No Use Talking. The envoy begins making its way through Shadesmar. Adolin is told there is no point in talking to Maya, a Deadeyes, by the Truth Watcher's Mistbren, who feels Maya cannot understand him. Adolin is convinced Maya can. Adolin reviews the plan with Shallan, which was to present the Honorspren with gifts along with written requests to begin relations. Nothing too pushy. An essay written by Yasna, another written by Dalinar, with Queen Fen's advisement, and a third from the Azish Imperial Court. Adolin was to request admittance to the Honorspren Fortress, stay a few days to get them used to the idea of talking to humans, then leave with a promise that they'd speak more in the future. That's on 329. Syl doesn't think it will work. She doubts he'll even be admitted to their fortress. The travelers secure a barge to take them to the southern bank. The trip should take roughly 2 weeks. Adolin vows to do his part. He intends to give the Spren his father's letters and more. Find a way to persuade them to help his way, whatever that was. Shallan realizes that someone had gone through her things and used the cube because it had been moved. She concludes that the spy is amongst them and using the cube to communicate with Mraize. Chapter 23, Binding Wounds. Kaladin's new role has allowed him to be not sad. Dalinar's armies begin departing for Azir. It hurts Kaladin to see his friends leave. Kaladin feels alone. Teft announces that he isn't going with the army. He stepped down. There's too much wrong with his brain. That's on 339. Kaladin is upset with him at first, but soon thanks Teft and accepts him as his new surgeon's assistant. Chapter 24, Full of Awe. Shallan is upset by how Veil violated the compact. She doesn't want to help find the spy right now despite the others' urging, but they won't let her retreat and hide. From ELA's book, the group had discovered that the Ghostbloods were obsessed with a specific Spren named Ba-Ado Mishrum, one of the Unmade. It had been the Spren who had taken over for Odium following the final desolation. She had granted the singers forms of power. By capturing Ba-Ado Mishrum, locking her in a gemstone, humankind had stolen the minds of the singers in ancient times. Radiant was increasingly certain Mraize was hunting the gemstone that held Ba-Ado Mishrum. That's on 343. Shallan wonders if Mraize's desire to transport Stormlight off-world and to find Ba-Ado Mishrum are related. Adolin and Shallan catch up. He's worried about the mission because of what Syl told him. Shallan informs Adolin she robbed Yasna. He finds it amusing. The Mistspren, dreaming though awake, informs them that if they wish to learn more about Ba-Ado Mishrum, they should ask the Heralds. I have heard several were there for her binding. Elan, Klek, find them. Ask them, on 349. Chapter 25, Devotary of Mercy. Teft and Kaladin find Cressa, a refugee's missing uncle, Norrell, in the Devotary of Mercy, where those with mental ailments are cared for. They're deplored by how the patients are treated and the conditions they find them in. Kaladin decides to take Norrell, who has been suicidal, into his care and warns that he will be back for more patients. He wants to try new treatments, which he hopes will be able to help them. Chapter 26, A Little Espionage. After tipping her trunk, Shallan and her personas confirm that the cube couldn't have shifted faces unless someone had removed it from the luggage. Vale determines that they're going to try 2 different methods of finding the spy. The first is to catch them in a lie or a past misdeed, then push them until they grow uncomfortable and admit to us more than they intended. If this method doesn't work, we'll try something else. Something that takes longer, but is more likely to work. We will find a way to feed each suspect a different tidbit of false information, a tidbit they will in turn feed to Mraize. Depending on which piece of information is leaked, we'll know who did the leaking and identify our spy. That's on 364. Shallan and her personas set their plan in motion. Chapter 27, Banners. Navani considers the nature and meaning of banners as Dalinar's armies continue to go off to war. Navani sees Yasna, Dalinar, and Little Gav off. They had taken precautions against Taravangian's trap. Sabarial is sent to put the war camps under their control. Navani begins overseeing Urithuru's maintenance. They had discovered a room that had been sealed off with a stone model of the tower inside. Thalalar is going to inspect the model for hidden secrets. Navani discovers that for the first time in weeks, the mysterious figure who was angry about Fabrials was attempting to contact her via Spanreed. Chapter 28, Heresies. The mysterious writer complains that Navani has not obeyed. You must stop your experiments with Fabrials. I made it explicitly clear that you needed to stop. You have not. You have only increased your heresies. That's on 388. A group of Ardents and scholars who had been studying the decay on the Spanreed realize that it's almost non-existent, indicating that the writer is near, within the tower's walls. The writer goes on to explain that Navani's actions are heresy because Spren are meant to be free. By capturing them, you trap nature itself. Can a storm survive if placed in a prison? Can a flower bloom with no sunlight? This is what you do. Your religion is incomplete. That's on 388. Then goes on to say that the truth is not evident because you are human. Humans cannot be trusted. You do not know how to keep promises, and promises are what make the world function. We make the world function. You must release your captured Spren. You must, on 389. The group realizes that they are speaking to a Spren. Navani accidentally kicks the Spanreed over the edge of the plateau. She wants to make sure the ruby breaks, and its broken nature is made clear. Navani thinks she knows who the Spren is. She wants to make sure that it and its agent, the spy who likely hid the Spanreed ruby for Navani to find in the first place, know of the lost Spanreed to see how they react to the news. Chapter 29, A Cage Without Bars. The barge reaches land. Shallan and a small team go ashore to scout the town. Eventually, they return and Shallan announces that it's safe for everyone to go into town. Shallan decides to stay on the barge while everyone else goes into town so she can be alone. She realizes that the cube has been moved for the second time before contacting Mraize. While in town, Adolin and Maya find a new Deadeyes, one who had been afflicted recently. Godeki arrives to tell Adolin that he thinks he'll want to see the humans. Chapter 30, The Betrayal. Shallan thinks she might have held a cube when she'd summoned a Shardblade and killed her mother. She gives Mraize her report. She says that they have been watched by Odd Spren. Mraize thinks they were corrupted by Shah Not. He thinks they must bind her to us, a Spren of Odium willing to betray him, an ancient creature with equally ancient knowledge. I give you the secondary mission. Watch for those Spren closely and make contact if you can on 406. Vale agrees, and when Mraize mentions Glory Spren, she knows Beryl is the spy. The humans are Tukari, apparently traitors, who had somehow managed to cross into Shadesmar. Adolin wonders how. The Tukari, always wreathed in shadow, refuse to speak to Adolin and Godeki. Shallan tells Pattern Beryl is the spy. Vale wonders if they found out too easily. Pattern expresses his worry over Shallan's current state. Adolin speaks to Nodum, the captain of the ship he and company sailed on the last time they were in Shadesmar. Nodum thinks Adolin's diplomatic mission is insane, the main reason being the humans' betrayal of Os, which led to mass genocides. Nodum admits he was removed from duty for allowing the ancient daughter to go. He spent 5 months in prison and has been exiled from lasting integrity. He hopes to dissuade Adolin from his course. Adolin is more determined than ever to get the Honor to listen and prove himself useful. Chapter 31, Daughter of Traitors. Raboniel, Venli, and their team march toward Urithiru. Raboniel thinks Venli an odd choice by Leshwi, since she is the daughter of traitors. Venli realizes that Raboniel knows she is a spy for Leshwi. Raboniel reveals that they serve Odium for the rewards he will grant them. Chapter 32 of 3 Minds. Adolin realizes the Tukari caravan had been following them since they left the port town weeks earlier. Shallan wonders how to handle the knowledge that Beryl is the spy. Vale still has her doubts Beryl is the spy. Adolin wonders if they should change their approach with the Honor Spren but can't come up with any good ideas. Vale informs Adolin that Radiant and I are coping mechanisms that, for the most part, work. But something deeper has started to manifest. Shallan is worried that the person you see in her is a lie, that the person you love is a lie. And it's not only you, Pattern, Dalinar, Yasna, Navani. She worries that they all don't know the real her, because of things that happened to her and more. Some of the things she was forced to do, she's beginning to think that Shallan is the fake one, the false identity. That there is a monster deep inside her that is her real self. She fears it's inevitable that the truth will come out, and everyone will leave her when it does. That's on 427. Adolin begins to understand and expresses his desire to help. Chapter 33, Understanding. Kaladin releases 6 men from the sanitarium who had similar symptoms. He begins rehabilitating them by having them speak to one another, people who can understand, etc. Chapter 34, A Flame Never Extinguished. Adolin holds counsel with the Radiants. They don't like any of his proposals on how to appeal to the Honorspren. Vale continues to doubt Beryl as the spy. Radiant is starting to agree. The Tukari continue to follow the travelers but won't speak to any of their messengers. Adolin fears he is going to fail in his mission. Vale realizes they need to leave the cube unguarded in a non-suspicious way so that they can confirm the spy's identity. Adolin admits to Shallan that he can't tolerate being around his father anymore. Even though he's become the man Adolin always wanted him to be, they've grown apart. Chapter 35, The Strength of a Soldier. The Tukari appear to be giving up on following the travelers. Adolin realizes the truth. Adolin prepares the travelers for a fight. It appears the Tukari had been following Notum, who had been traveling in the same direction as they were until recently. Adolin arrives on the scene first, with Maya and Gallant, to find Notum and his attendants bound. Notum was being tortured. Adolin decides to buy some time, since his soldiers are still several minutes out. Adolin is wounded by a spear thrust on his right side while fighting the Tukari. Maya and Gallant come to his rescue. As a team, they manage to frighten the Tukari Adolin hadn't killed off and rescue Notum. Adolin's soldiers arrive soon after. Chapter 36, The Price of Honor. Notum and his attendants can't figure out why Notum was attacked. Adolin's gut wound is tended to. Adolin decides to take Notum to Lasting Integrity with them to help ensure his safety. Shallan begins to doubt Beryl is a spy because she can't handle the sight of the corpses. Pattern assures Radiant and Vale that nothing unusual had happened at camp while they were away, but Shallan is certain the cube had been touched. They begin to wonder if they should suspect Pattern. Vale lays a trap for Pattern and realizes that he was lying to her. As they approach Lasting Integrity, a contingent of Honorspren ride out to meet them. Vale vows to get to the bottom of everything and keep Shallan safe. The Honorspren rip up Adolin's letters and try to turn him away. He will not go. He demands a trial to prove his worth. To stand trial for his ancestors, the Honorspren agree. A few of the travelers will inform Dalinar of what happened, while a few stay behind to care for Notum and wait to hear from Adolin. Adolin, Vale, Pattern, Maya, and Gallant enter the Spren city. Adolin is seized and bound upon entering the city. Adolin refuses to return to his father empty-handed. Chapter 37, Silence from the Dead. Navani's soldiers capture a man who had tried to replace the lost Banreed Fabrial for the Phantom Spren. Bentley and company reach Urthuru during an Everstorm. The singers begin to carry out their plan. Tef informs Kaladin that no one has seen Debid for 3 days. Kaladin had introduced Debid to the men he had been treating since he was suffering from severe battle shock. Bentley and company invade Urthuru. Bentley is discomfited by her first kill. The group begins to make its way up toward the tower. They hope the dead silence will go unnoticed. Chapter 38, Rhythm of the Terrors. Navani investigates an explosion that killed Nem and Talna and destroyed their laboratory. She assumes Zeth's sphere was destroyed. Navani asks Rushu to catalog the destroyed room's contents. Navani wonders if the explosion is tied to the mysterious communication she had received. Bentley and company make it to the basement chamber. They approach a crystal monolith. Raboniel rests a hand on it and speaks to the sibling. She promises the sibling won't awake as herself. Raboniel begins to corrupt the pillar and fully activate the tower's defenses in a way that mutes the radiance as opposed to the fused. Bentley hopes there won't be any more killing. Teft and Kaladin speak to Elaine, who admits to having seen Debid yesterday. Teft, Elaine, and Syl urge Kaladin to join his treatment program. He agrees to join the next meeting. Kaladin begins to feel as though he's finally starting to put himself back together. The tower breaks, an alarm sounds. The singers engage the humans. Voidlight moves from Raboniel into the pillar, infusing a small portion. The effort seems to exhaust Raboniel, but the deed was done. Raboniel announces, "The tower is not fully corrupted, but I have achieved my initial goal. The tower's defenses have been activated and inverted to our favor. The Radiants will be unable to fight. Go, give the signal to the Shanaim. Seize the city on 487. Chapter 39, Invasion. Teft collapses. Kaladin thinks it may be a stroke. Kaladin tries to lash Teft to make him lighter while he carries him to help. It doesn't work. Red informs Navani that her prisoner is Debid. He's desperate for her to contact the Spren. Navani receives a message which says, "Full human, we are under attack. The enemy is already inside the tower. Quickly!" You must do exactly as I say, or we are all doomed. I am the sibling. I am the friend of this tower. The enemy, they are doing something to me. This is bad. You need to infuse. That's on 491. The sibling is cut off as Red collapses. Kaladin realizes his powers are inhibited, that he's experiencing things that remind him of the strange fabrial the Fuse had used on him in Hearthstone. As Kaladin and Elaine carry Teft toward Lyran's clinic, they pass more fallen radiants. Eventually, they discover that Syl feels sleepy, the fused are invading Urithiru, radiants are falling left and right, and span reads don't work. Navani begins to handle the chaos with the help of runners. She discovers that David communicated with the sibling through the veins of garnet on the walls. Lyran returns to the clinic and informs Kaladin that their people are safe. Syl knows something is wrong with her bond to Kaladin. She can't travel farther than a floor away from him without growing distant and forgetful. She can normally travel several miles away from him before she faces any obstacles. Kaladin fears Urithiru has already lost and knows they need to find a way to contact Yasna and Dalinar. Chapter 40, In for All. Navani discovers all of the Radiants have collapsed and that the enemy holds the Oath Gates, although other fabrials aren't working properly. Navani orders an assault to try and recapture the Pillar Heart. She hopes to find a way to wake the Radiants. Navani speaks to the sibling through the garnets. She explains what the Lady of Pains has done and that the negative effects could be reversed from the pillar. Navani wants to help the sibling from being altered further. The sibling thinks this may be possible with a vast amount of Stormlight, and a method of protection the sibling's last bondsmith put in place. Chapter 41, The Most Dangerous. The pursuer turns into a ribbon of red light and goes in search of Kaladin to exact his revenge. Kaladin is the only one he has permission to kill. The others are to be left alive. Only those who resist are to be killed. The fallen Radiants are to be gathered and brought to Raboniel, who vows to end the war forever. Benley realizes that Raboniel is more interested in the fabrials the humans have come up with than anything else. Raboniel expresses that their war is endless because humans cannot hold or exploit that which they create, but we cannot stretch far enough to come up with anything new. If we truly want an end, it will take a partnership. That's on 512. Navani begins to set her plan to help the sibling and restore the Radiants into motion. Kaladin delivers supplies to the refugees and people of Hearthstone, who now inhabit an occupied floor of the tower. Chapter 42, Armor and Teeth. Navani infuses a topaz set into the wall with a tuning fork trick she learned from a Thalen artifabrian. Her actions reveal a hidden door to a circular chamber with a pedestal at its heart. Elaine decides to go to the enemy. He feels it may be the safest option for him since an occupation is coming. Elaine hopes it will be a temporary farewell. He intends to become a spy and to find a way to help from the inside. Elaine departs, leaving Kaladin behind. Navani and her team begin to infuse the large sapphire on the pedestal to create a barrier that will prevent humans, the unmade, and singers from reaching the sibling. The sibling urges her to hurry because the Lady of Pains will infuse my entire heart, the pillar, in the proper order using her void light. In so doing, she would corrupt me and leave me. Leave me as one of the unmade. You must hurry. Navani, they have activated the Oath Gate again. Fresh enemy troops have arrived on 526. Navani learns that Moash is the individual working the Oath Gate and that the Lady of Pains has stopped what she was doing. The human soldiers led by Teofil nearly make it to the basement, drawing Raboniel's attention, but the tides are turned against them when the pursuer joins the fight. The sibling informs Navani that her men are dead and that the Lady of Pains has returned to destroy her. Navani's team manages to erect the barrier. The sibling informs Navani that she could be corrupted through the sapphire they had infused, so it will need to be destroyed. This will weaken the shield. Navani realizes that she will have to surrender and hope that the barrier will last until her husband could arrive to save them, or for her to discover another way of rescuing the Radiants. Navani orders the destruction of the sapphire, entire fabrial, glass globe, and maps of the tower. Navani prepares to surrender. Raboniel senses Stormlight in the system. She informs Venli that the sibling, the tower, Urithiru, is the child of honor and cultivation, created to fight Odium. The place runs on the sibling's light, a mixture of the essences of its parents. Stormlight alone shouldn't be able to work the tower's core systems. Stormlight to the sibling is incomplete, like a key missing several of its teeth on 529. Raboniel is trying to break the lock when the shield arises, keeping her from her work. Raboniel learns that Navani has been captured and wishes to meet her. Navani surrenders to Raboniel. The terms include turning over the Radiants and all people being of equal status despite their eye color. Raboniel wishes to hire Navani to work on fabrial projects. Navani says she'll think about it. She has lost her throne. Chapter 43, Men and Monsters. Kaladin and his family discover that Navani surrendered. He feels as though the war is over. Kaladin wonders why he's the only Radiant who hadn't fallen asleep. He notices Teft is almost awake, a windrunner of the same oath, and wonders if there's a connection. Some of the singers come to collect the fallen Radiants. Kaladin refuses to let them take Teft and gets into a fight with a Regal. Kaladin kills the Regal and lets his companion Warform go. Lyran is angered by his son's actions and refuses to go into hiding with Kaladin, refuses to let the family go with him. Lyran vows to find a way to get everyone out of Kaladin's mess. He sees his son as a monster. Kaladin responds, "I've taken oaths too, Father. I'm sorry I'm not the man you wanted me to be, but if I were a monster, I would never have let that other soldier go." That's on 546. Kaladin departs with Teft slung over his shoulder. End of Part 2. Interludes. I-4. Vyre. Vyre realizes the only chain that still holds him is Kaladin. He feels the chain can only be broken if Kaladin acknowledged that Vyre was right. Odium visits Vyre in a vision. He knows Kaladin will be a problem for him. Odium wishes to claim Kaladin as he has claimed Vyre and seeks Vyre's help. Odium learns that Kaladin can be hurt by isolating him and making him fear. The pair plan to show Kaladin visions to bring him to the brink before finding a way to make him leap from the ledge. I-5. Lift. Lift informs Wendell that she asked the Night Watcher not to change. Lift doesn't want to change or grow up because the last time things felt right was when she was with her mother, who is now deceased. When she was her little girl, Wendell and Lift noticed the raid on Ur-Thuru, the change in their feelings, and Lift's powers. Eventually, Lift and Wendell run into a tall man with scarred features, who looks forward to hunting her. Lift starts running. I-6. A boon and a curse. Taravangian considers his work with the diagram and both what he has and has not accomplished. There is a part of him that wishes he could have done more, done better. Odium visits Taravangian and informs him it's time to give the order for his men to betray the coalition. Taravangian knows Odium is planning a war for the heavens with humans on the front lines. He had wanted Dalinar, but could not turn him, which gives Taravangian hope. He manages to trick Odium into showing him the future. Again, there are sections ruined by Renarin. No one is capable of seeing Renarin's future. Since he's close to Renarin, Taravangian realizes that Odium can't see his future right now either. Odium announces that he will miss Taravangian. Taravangian realizes he is showing off. Odium is lonely, could be made to fear. Although he is a powerful god, his mind was human. Taravangian looks farther and realizes Odium fears Seth and his sword. Taravangian gives the order and is arrested, but decides not to give up because he knows a powerful secret. And now I want to take a little bit of time to review Part 2 of Brandon Sanderson's Rhythm of War from the Stormlight Archives. It's Volume 4. I think Part 2 is really an expansion of the stage that was set in Part 1. It's a continuation of those thoughts. It's diving a little deeper. And we can see this in a bunch of different ways. First, we see that the rift that has been driven between Lyran and Kaladin, his son, has widened. At first, Kaladin is a soldier, and his father has never liked that. He's wanted Kaladin to use his hands for good, for the betterment of other people, as a surgeon. But Kaladin had turned to war and to killing, and that drove a rift between them. And then things start to shift when Kaladin is forced out of the war, forced out of his military position, and forced to find a new way for himself, a new path, and he chooses to go back to his training as a surgeon. And then when the tower is breached and war comes to him and he fights, that final wedge is driven between them when Kaladin refuses to let the Fused take Teft, the enemy take Teft, and he kills one of them, and his father refuses to go with him into hiding.
Speaking on the dynamic between Kaladin and his family, it's probably my least favorite part of the book. I don't think it comes off as very natural because his father comes off as very stubborn to the point where it's almost not something that a normal human being would do, because it's obvious that Kaladin's trying, and despite what his father wants him to do and wants him to be, that's not who he is, and he makes decisions that are detrimental to himself, his family, to Kaladin, because he's just stubborn. And I don't really like the dynamic between them. I understand why it's there, because it has to be a portion of Kaladin's struggle, like his internal struggle, but I really could just do without his father in general as a character most of the time. I will say that Part 2 did a good job of moving me away from my fears of the Shadesmar plotline, because I was worried that it was going to be kind of like the last book, and I hated Shadesmar in the last book. But the interesting dynamic with Shallan trying to figure out the spy and the trial that was going to be happening that gets teased towards the end of Part 2 made me realize that this was going to be more interesting than just kind of aimlessly wandering from point to point like it was in the last book. And even that slower-ish chapter where Adolin agrees to do the trial is immediately followed up by the invasion of Urithiru, which is a really good chapter. And you start moving forward into that like lowest point for the main characters where they've kind of lost everything. They're in a position where they have no power. And it's a really strong follow-up to some chapters that were a little bit slower.
There's definitely a lot of tension in part 2. Part 1 definitely set the stage, and like I said, this really expanded on it. Now we have the good guys, if you will, divided. We have a group of people in Urithiru like Navani. We have Yasna off with Gav and Dalinar to fight a war where Taravangian, it has been teased, is turning on them, as was expected. And then we have Adolin and Shallan and a group of other people in Shadesmar. So there's really no core group, if you will, no communication between everybody. Everyone is divided, and on top of that, everyone is facing some seemingly insurmountable obstacle. Adolin was just captured by the Honor Spren. He now has to face a trial, and I don't know if he fully understands the implications of what that means.
I definitely don't think in this moment he understands the implications of it. I think it was a kind of a reckless decision that he made because he's kind of wrapped up in, living up to his father's expectations and his own expectations for himself, and I definitely feel like it came off as reckless, but I think that's very consistent with his character and where his character is at this point.
He's not the smart sibling. He's the fighty, pointy sword, stabby sibling. And then, of course, we have Navani back in the tower, who is now a captive. Kaladin's off in hiding. He, as I mentioned previously, is no longer on speaking terms with his family. He's just stuck with an unconscious Tef in Syl, who is not functioning the way she would normally be functioning. And then we don't really know what's going on with Dalinar and Yasna. We know that Taravangian has turned on them. They have ridden off to war, but we don't see the repercussions of that action at this point in the novel, and we know that there's going to be a lot of tension because it's teased now. We know that the span reeds are no longer working in Urithiru because of the attack that was made on the tower, and communication is going to continue to break down and make everyone feel increasingly divided and presumably weaker and more stressed than they might normally when they can communicate with each other and help each other and understand what the others are going through.
Yeah, this part does a good job of laying some seeds for important moments later on, like the dynamic between Navani and the sibling, which you at this point can probably assume where it's going to go, and I know in the moment I assumed where it was going to go and ended up being right, but it definitely is an interesting dynamic. And you also get the seeds of the situation between Navani and Raboniel, who ends up being a really interesting character, and the dynamic between the two of them I think is one of the stronger dynamics between two characters in all of the books so far. I like a lot of their discussions. I like a lot of the things that they learn and the way that you get world building from the conversations between them that are going to happen in the next part and going forward into the book. You also get the seeds of the ending with Taravangian, which ends up leading to one of the more depressing moments / chapters later on in the book. And, we'll discuss that when it happens. But he gets this moment of hope and kind of elation at learning what he learns in this chapter, and that turns into something later on, and it's a moment that goes really high and then later on gets really deflated, and I think it hits really hard because of how they set it up and how much they focused on building Taravangian as a character.
I think he's definitely one of the more interesting characters in the series because he makes it clear that he's going to do a certain thing, but it also seems like he has a plan at the back of his mind that isn't being presented to us at the same time, and that's something I've always appreciated about his character. And the other thing I find interesting is that people know they shouldn't trust him, and then they do it anyway, and they're like, oh, we should have known, and it's like, well, you did. You didn't do anything about it, sillies.
Well, it's kind of they were in a position where they didn't really have any choice to not help him because of the war situation that they're in and his position within his, segment of the world. And you get more from him in terms of what you were talking about, like the thing that he's kind of doing behind the scenes. You get more of that in this book than you got in the last book. I feel like he was not quite as deep in the last book because you didn't get more of his end game. like what he was actually trying to accomplish besides the short term of like, saving his people specifically and betraying the others so he could save his people specifically. I also will say that in the Shadesmar plotline, I was very excited to see the Maya thread continue because I was waiting for that to culminate in the last book, and it never happened because they spent a decent amount of time on it. He had a lot of one-on-one chapters where he was, training in front of her, or he was trying to communicate with her, and I was waiting for it to happen in the last book, and it didn't happen. And I was glad that it didn't just get dropped, and that it ended up being a plot line that continued when he returned to Shadesmar. And I was just waiting, like, I know something's gonna happen, they're building towards something, and I was just waiting for it to happen. And that was really exciting for me because it was something that kind of carried over from the last book, one of the bright spots from the last book when I didn't feel like there was a lot of them.
Yeah, but we're not going to talk about that book right now. We're talking about this book right now.
It's very true.
And this book is better. I like the stage that is being set. I like all the tension that's arisen. I've liked, to an extent, how the characters are reaching lows so that they can develop and grow as people. But at the same time, I remember as I was reading it, it felt like a bit much. I was like, oh, we're back to the depressed Kaladin chapter. Darn it.
I will say the depressed Kaladin and Kaladin in like altered mind state is not as bad in this book as it was in the last book. I feel like Kaladin was borderline insufferable in the last book, and it made me hate him as a character. This one, I think he was a lot better, mostly because there was enough going on where I felt like we didn't have to wallow in it. I felt like in the last book, I know we're not talking about the last book, but I feel like in the last book, there wasn't enough happening plot-wise to make you be okay with the fact that you were dealing with your main character just being a crappy character. And in this one, every chapter that goes on, there's something happening, there's important things being learned, there's plot that's happening, there's character moments that are happening. So you're not just sitting there wallowing in the fact that you don't like any of the characters and you don't like anything that's going on.
I would agree with most of that. I do think that there is a part of me, though, that wishes it wasn't such a major focus, because we're also getting a lot of Shallan and her multiple personalities or personas, if you will. We're getting Adolin's self-doubt, his hatred for his father, his resentment, and Navani's, to an extent, we haven't quite gotten there fully yet, but quest to really figure out her own purpose and stand on her own feet as opposed to being associated with other people, which is something that was hinted at in the prologue.
I will say the Shallan stuff started to get on my nerves, where she was doing the whole withdrawing into herself thing, and I don't remember, there was a term that they used for it, and they were constantly using that term, and she was just constantly withdrawn, and they were trying to like coax her out, the other personalities and whatnot, and that was kind of getting on my nerves. I'm looking at it from a hindsight perspective that I really like where it ends up. The last couple of chapters before that whole plotline culminates are really good, and I think the culmination and how it manifests is also really good. So I can look at it and go, oh, it was a really good through line, but in the moment I was kind of getting tired of it.
Gotta take the good with the bad, Jer.
That's true. So but I think sticking the landing can make you forgive a lot of things. I feel like, again, talking about the last book didn't stick the landing in almost any plot line.
We don't mention the last book, Jeremy. We've spoken about this.
I feel like Dalinar was the only one who got decent payoff in the last book, but everybody else kind of got shafted. So everything that you were kind of having to put up with, you never got a good culmination, so it didn't pay off. In this one, I feel like everybody kind of pays off. So regardless of the things that bother you in the moment, I think it's, it ends up in a good place.
And there you have it, our review of part 2. Stay tuned for part 3, which is coming in the near future.
Yes, we are enjoying this, and we hope it is helpful ahead of the release of the next book in December. If you like this, please like the video, let us know. Comment down below. Are you reading along with us? You just here for a refresher? And if you want to see the rest of the parts, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of this content going forward, and ring that bell so you know what's up. We'll catch you in the next one.
Bye, guys.
Hi, Tisha Valenza, aka Poison Ivy, and you've just been watching King's Entertainment Reviews. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch.